All right, stream is up. I'm going to do a little few steps to get it going, and then we'll get started. Right now, just to share on social media, and we'll be good. All right, let's get started. Hey, this is Josh. I'm doing a little stream. Going to have this recording up, walking through Copeland, Apple's failed operating system. This is not a super researched episode other than just my interest in this operating system. So let's talk through it. Recently, I've gotten on a kick of buying vintage Macs, and one of the Macs that I bought is a Power Macintosh 7500, and this is a machine that is able to run Copeland, which is Apple's failed operating system from the 1994-1996 timeframe. As we walk through looking at it together, I'll blab and share various things about it that I can recall, but mainly we're going to tour through it and take a look at it together to see what it looks like and what it feels like. As we do, I just got to look up the name of this video real quick. I got to give a big thanks, and I'll give a link in the comments in the description once this recording is up, for a video by Paul's Crap called Apple's Copeland OS Info and Tour. That video had a key piece of information for me about how to get Copeland running and booting successfully on my Power Mac. And he does a really thorough job going through there. So we're going to probably hit a lot of the same things in Copeland as he did, because there's not a lot there. He also runs the older versions of Copeland as well, D9 and D7. We just have D11 running. I have not wanted to risk taking it off because I want to keep it running on my Mac. So with that, let's get started and jump in. On the screen share there, you can see my Power Mac 7500 running. It doesn't show that in the About This Macintosh box, but this is not Copeland. This is normal Macintosh System 7, probably just about called Mac OS at this time. It's System Software 7.5.2. And you see I've got 24 megabytes of RAM. That's going to be very important later. As we click through here, if you haven't seen System 7, this is what it looked like. You had a nice 3D trash can and a not 3D hard drive icon, very simple one. These flat but classic kind of blue-purple folder icons. And yeah, these nice racing stripes on the windows and just a dotted line to drag the window around. Got Marathon Infinity, of course, which is really great. Maybe we'll do some gaming on the stream later sometime. But this is what System 7 looked like. And for me, this was Macintosh growing up. I never had a Mac on black and white. I had it on color like this, and just this look. I had it. It was very familiar. But we had it for years and years, and we were ready for something new. And what's more, Apple needed drastically to get a better operating system foundation running. So they worked on a project codenamed Copeland, which is going to be Mac OS 8, so major version 8. To be clear from the start, the Mac OS 8 that was released was not Copeland. Copeland failed, it did not happen, and as a result they released a Mac OS 8 that was just an incremental update on System 7. Copeland technology did not go anywhere, and instead they had a different Mac OS 10 that ended up being used eventually. But I wanted to show this look and feel of System 7 to give you the context for what we're going to see when we see Copeland, because the look and feel of it was radically new and something that was very exciting to us. But as far as kind of explaining how we get into it, I've installed Copeland on this hard drive. It doesn't need a separate partition. System folder is where the System 7 lives, and then Mac OS folder over here is where Mac OS 8 lives. There's nothing really that we can do in this other than see an awesome icon looking at within System 7. Although take a look at the look of the Apple logo in the menu there. It's going to look a little different in Copeland. But all we need to do to start in Copeland is to press the caps lock key on the keyboard. I have a keyboard, an older Apple one, I forget the names, where the caps lock key is physical and it locks down. I found that one was needed. On my keyboard that doesn't have that, it has a digital electronic caps lock. Just pressing it in didn't work. I think maybe if you hold it down it might work. I haven't tested that yet. But when I put in the caps lock key and restart, we're going to see it. You'll probably hear the Mac boot sound over the microphone here. Let's restart into Copeland. There it is. So when Copeland D11 starts, you'll see, hopefully within a moment here, this animation that kind of comes in. A cool pixelated animation of Mac OS coming in. That's pretty impressive for the day. Microkernel initialization starting, complete. And so this, once I saw the word complete there, that's when I knew I had victory, or at least I had progress. So for the first couple weeks of trying to get Copeland running, I could not get past this step. It said microkernel initialization starting, and that's all it said. It would never proceed. Eventually, watching Paul's video, which again I'll link to in the description, he noted, he either said that he was using 24 megabytes of RAM, or I thought him or something I've written up seemed to say at some point that 32 megabytes would be okay, but that was the max. But somewhere else I got the sense that maybe 24 megabytes was the max. So this machine came with a bunch of RAM, and so I had to remove a bunch of it to get down to 24 megabytes. And once I got down to 24 megabytes, Copeland would boot, and we were good to go. So that was very exciting. Copeland is also famous for crashing the running OS, and so needing to have another Mac with a serial cable connected to run it in the debugger so you could see what went wrong if you're a programmer and at least keep the machine running as a result. I haven't actually noticed that problem, at least the amount of work that I've done in Copeland itself, just kind of playing around, it seemed to run fine. I haven't gotten it to crash just from running. So running it with just a single machine has been okay so far. So we got through the boot sequence there with some not very typical for Mac text output happening on there. But again, this was a developer release of the OS. It never got to the point where it could be released for users. It barely got to the point where it could be released for developers. Famously, in the 1996 demo, I forget if it was Macworld Conference, where Copeland was shown to developers, one journalist quipped that it was amazing they showed us the beast because it was crashing so much and corrupting hard drives that the Apple employees needed to constantly swap out computers to have running ones where Copeland was actually working on it. So clearly it never got close to the point where it was going to be releasable. But at the time, I never saw Copeland running back in the day as a kid into Macs, but I did see screenshots, and those were exciting. And so now we're booted into Copeland, and we can see Copeland running. This is, yeah, just a couple months ago I saw for the first time. So let's take a tour through Copeland, and maybe I'll say more tips as we go along about it. Something I noticed is the 3D Macintosh hard drive icon. Something like that made it into Mac OS 8. 3D trash icon, that's very similar to what's in Mac OS 8. And this, probably you can see it on the video there, the fact that it's a gray title bar with some beveling, some kind of 3D effect there. And the super 3D looking 6-color Apple logo. Of course, the 6-color Apple logo would go away not too many years after this. But let's take a look and see what we can find. I'm going to click into Macintosh hard drive first because there are things you can do that will crash the OS, and I'm sure I'll do that at some point here. Let's take a look at Macintosh hard drive. So we have our macOS folder and system folder. Is there something underneath there, or is that just an animation? Oh yeah, that's just some kind of animation issue there. But you see these 3D folder look. So that was very exciting when we saw that for the first time in screenshots. Sorry about these visual effects here. It's Copeland. But more striking than that is the 3D look of the windows. Notice we still do need to use a dotted line, a 2-pixel dotted line to drag it around. We've not gotten to the point where that worked better. Yeah, this 3D look for the windows, the shrinkability to get it down like that. Now this look and feel was very similar in Mac OS 8. If I ever had two machines running side by side, my 20th anniversary Mac is right there, we could run the real Mac OS 8 that was released and see how close the look and feel was or was not. But it's quite close. Overall, this is what Mac OS 8 looked like, and even into Rhapsody and Mac OS 10 Server all had this platinum look until the aqua look of Mac OS 10 was developed and really took things forward in terms of Lightyear. Yeah, so this is the look. We got these the edges around here that we can drag the window from. corner there to resize the window, of course. And yeah, so let's see what else we can find. See if there's anything in the macOS folder that's interesting. I wonder if Apple menu items is directly workable. Apple Talk Setup and Chooser. Yeah, so there's not a lot in this version of Copeland. Earlier versions have more to show, more control panels, even an about box. There's not an about box in this version of Copeland. But yeah, we have what we have. Back in System 7 and macOS 8, macOS 9, you'd use these folders a lot, drop in control panels and extensions to get things running. So that was a very common thing that you would do. So all of this code is not backwards compatible at all with System 7 applications. I don't know if they intended it for it eventually to be backwards compatible, but let me just try opening System 7 simple text. I will probably crash this thing at some point, just because I'm more aggressively clicking through things than I had done in the past in my just playing around with Copeland. But I'm glad to get a chance to share it with you all here. And I am planning on exhibiting at VCF Southeast here in Atlanta, Georgia, where I live. Going to VCF Southeast last year was my first exciting experience with the vintage computer community in person, and it's what got me into this vintage Mac collecting kick. And so I'm excited to be there. I'm planning on having a table running Copeland, BOS, Rhapsody, and maybe macOS 10 server as well to kind of give people a chance to play around with them. Yeah, we have frozen Copeland. So great. Okay, so opening simple text is not something we should do apparently. Let's just give it a restart. Command Control Power button. Now I'm not sure if it'll work to go straight into Copeland with the caps lock key again. When I first booted up from cold boot, from being off, I find that I have to boot into System 7 first before I start over. Here it goes. Yeah, it looks like we're getting into Copeland just fine. You also cannot run Copeland if you have, well, let me just say, let's limit this. I haven't done extensive research. In my experience, I think at some point I had macOS 8, real macOS 8, released macOS 8, and tried to install Copeland on top of that, and Copeland was having none of it. It was too confusing. Copeland was like, I thought I was macOS 8. What is this macOS 8 doing here? And it was a very awkward Spider-Man pointing moment. So that did not work. So you want to get a historical version of System 7.5 on there for Copeland to know what's going on. I don't know any of the technical details of how they interact. But yeah. It's been very exciting to me that, again, I can crash Copeland here, clearly, but it starts up fine. It's not unreliable in starting up or anything like that, and I have not seen it crash by just sitting and leaving it running. Just a moment to start up here. What else is there said about Copeland? In the background, so Copeland was not Apple's first attempt to move beyond classic Mac OS. You know, the System 7 was still based on the same code base that the original Macintosh system software from 1984 was running. So when Apple first put out the Macintosh, they really had to cut corners and get creative with assembly language and machine code to get it all to fit on the original 128K machines. And so there was things even at the time that they knew were not ideal, but they made as compromises to make a machine that had a graphical user interface that was somewhat affordable, which did lead to the graphical user interface revolution. But they continued to build on that code base, and developers said that the code was so interlinked it was hard to extend. And by the 90s, the increased needs of computers showed that a new foundation was needed. Now, Apple had made several attempts for newer operating systems over the years, each of which failed for various different reasons, one of the key ones which is mismanagement within Apple. But Copeland was the last one when Apple was really in a crisis. And in 1996, CEO Gil Amelio, if I'm remembering right, brought in a leader, I forget her role or name, again, this is not researched, but she was brought in to lead operating system technology, amongst other things. She evaluated Copeland. She decided this is not going to be shippable. We need to kill it, and we need to buy an operating system instead. That resulted in Apple talking to B Incorporated about potentially buying the B operating system, but ultimately acquiring Next and Next Step as the foundation for Rhapsody and then Mac OS X. All right, so let's see if this operating system is even clickable yet. Let's see what else we can find in Copeland. Let's just look through the menus first. That seems like that might be safe. So in the Apple menu, we just have those 2 control panels and About This Macintosh. File menu, you may see a top menu item there that'll be a little confusing. We'll get to that in just a minute. We can make folders, close windows, get info. Can we get info on things? You know, as a kid with not a lot of income to buy games, I had some computer games and video games and stuff, but I was obsessed with the Macintosh, and so I would click through it, look at all the look and feel, and in the photographs of Copeland and things like that, or BOS. I was very excited to look at all the details. So just kind of looking over Copeland for myself at all these details is pretty exciting. So we can get info on a item in a pretty straightforward way. Sharing. I cannot imagine sharing works in Copeland. All right, nothing is happening, so I may have killed it. The mouse still works, so it just did nothing. That's great. Let's see if I can make an alias. I forget what put away is. Let's make an alias for simple text. This font is different than what shows up in System 7. System 7 uses the Chicago font for the operating system. This is using something else. I think it's the same font that was used in Mac OS 8 because they kind of just made this look and feel work on the basis of System 7. That's the real Mac OS 8 that they eventually released, and Mac OS 9 was also based on this foundation. There were some improvements, but it was incremental to tide things over until 2000 or 2001 when Apple was finally able to release Mac OS X on the new foundation. Same foundation they've developed to today, from the PowerPC processor to Intel to Apple Silicon. I don't know what put away does. I feel like find probably doesn't work. So let's try out find. Find is disabled because it is not scheduled to appear in DR1. If you really want to try it, there's an extension library to turn it on. I don't think I have that extension library. This button also is a great look and feel. The buttons in classic Mac, where even once there's color, the buttons are just black and white. And so this was kind of a cool feel. Like, we love this look as you hover over it. All very similar to release Mac OS 8. Some performance issues here where a window just doesn't redraw. Okay, you can sort of get it working if you hover over it or select it. That's interesting. Page setup. Dare I attempt to print? I've enjoyed on my classic Mac and BOS and Rhapsody systems to be able to get software development environments working. I never wrote Mac OS applications in classic Mac OS, but you know, one of the advantages of these new operating systems was higher abstractions and less boilerplate or low-level challenges to be able to build applications. Got to restart again. And so I would love to be able to see what Copeland development was like, but we never got to that point. I believe the README for Copeland says that Copeland D11 is not set up to do development within Copeland or even to develop applications yet. It's set up for developers to be able to write drivers. So the drivers for presumably mainly hardware interfaces could be written to work with Copeland, so they're getting that out early. Again, another sign and state of just how far they did not make it to get this into the hands of developers successfully. I should save my extensive talking for once I've crashed Copeland and we can talk about it more there. Looking forward to doing some BOS streaming and Rhapsody streaming as well sometime. It's so cool to have those running. They've been pretty straightforward to get going. BOS was very exciting as it was coming from another company, but really taking a media-focused and multi-processor-focused look at computing way early, way before that became common. And so BOS was an interesting, really promising other operating system. Things could have been fairly different for Apple if they had gone with it. But something that I wanted to get at before, there was no surprises as far as where operating systems need to go. It had been known early on, even some of the things from the start of the Macintosh. They just weren't able to pull it off. And to fit it in for the original release of the Macintosh, it needed to get out there and be popular and bought and purchased. And so, and it wasn't, these features weren't things they were able to add into that operating system once it was started. And so when BOS added things like multi-threading and protected memory, and there's one other thing that I forget, like that, those features, like, yep, that, we know we need it. Windows NT added it. Next Step added it. I'm pretty sure all those features were there in Next Step because that's the foundation for Mac OS X. It was just a matter of who can get it into the software and set it up in a way that works. And so, yeah, BOS or Mac OS, or Next Step, either would be good foundations for doing that for the Mac. And any technical trade-offs are beyond any of my experience. I think a lot of the decision around buying Next instead of B was related to Steve Jobs' influence within the company and the software industry and with the reality distortion field in general. But also Next Step was further along in some ways. I'm noticing that my cursor goes to here. Oh yeah, that's right. I have this machine, the onboard video card works. On my 8500, the onboard video does not work. And so I need to use a third-party PCI video card, but that works just great with BOS. Yeah, so let's check out these other menus. We've got an edit menu, show clipboard. I remember that. That's not a thing in it's not a thing in Mac OS X anymore, is it? Did we crash it again immediately? Maybe I'll just do the things that I know how to do in Copeland that I won't crash things. I should have charted out this path earlier. One of the main things I want to hit on is the demo applications included in Copeland. I think those will be good to take a look at. This is certainly demonstrating the instability. Yeah, there's not really much you can do with Copeland unless you were super technical and somehow, I don't know, if you do a Google, you could find development tools, but I think there's development tools that run on System 7, if anything. And so it's a little beyond my motivation level currently to figure out, because I never did any native Macintosh application development on any of these platforms. I have done some iOS development, and the latest iOS SDKs, those apps can run on the Mac as well. And so my current side project runs on modern Mac OS as well as on iOS. And it is really interesting once I get to show at least very early Mac OS X development is very similar to what we have now. A lot of things have evolved over time, but it's very similar tooling. In fact, so I used to work at Big Nerd Ranch, and Big Nerd Ranch started with this book, Cocoa Programming for Mac OS X by Aaron Hilligas, founder of Big Nerd Ranch. And so I don't know if I had this edition back in the day, but I had some early edition. This is the first edition I've just bought. This works with Mac OS 10.2, Mac OS X 10.2. I tried it out recently. Would love to stream that soon as well. But this was an early guide for programming on Mac OS X, which was all new. And Cocoa was the new technology that was all based on, which came from Next Step. And Aaron Hilligas and Big Nerd Ranch did a great job equipping developers, helping lead to the Mac ecosystem we have today. They're still around, still writing iOS guides and doing iOS training, as well as web and Android. So I worked there for 7 years here in Atlanta, Georgia, and really enjoyed it. A lot of remote development people as well. But yeah. All right, we're going to tread carefully in Copeland this time after it boots. Any minute now. We're already frozen. Oh my goodness gracious. This could be an ignominious end to our streaming session here as we have to reboot multiple times. As an encouragement for future streaming, I've not seen this happen on BOS or on Rhapsody, and so I think we'd be a little more stable there. The Copeland experience, ladies and gentlemen. If this doesn't work, I'll try to boot into System 7 and then reboot there into Mac OS, into Copeland. And if that doesn't work, then maybe I will have been proven wrong. Okay, this is another thing I wanted to show. So this book, I have the dust cover somewhere. I'm not sure where that got to. It's called Apple, but on the inside, it's called Apple: The Inside Story. There's a longer subtitle there, but usually it's called Apple Inside Story. This is a great book on Apple history. It ends around when Steve Jobs comes back to Apple, and they're like, we'll see what happened. What's going to happen? Turned out pretty well. But it covers a ton of detail. I was really curious for those in-between Steve years history, and that book does a great job of it, given the history of the other operating systems before Copeland, starting and failing Copeland, how it failed as well, and then the conversations with BOS and the acquisition of Next. So it really covers all that time period and the multiple Apple CEOs within that period. I believe Copeland was developed under Michael Spindler, and then when Gil Amelio took his role as CEO, and ultimately Copeland was killed under Gil Amelio, and under Gil Amelio the acquisition of Next happened, and the Rhapsody strategy for attempting to have a new Mac OS started. But then when Gil Amelio was removed and Steve Jobs became interim CEO, and he presided over the Rhapsody strategy, which, as I'll share hopefully in a future video, Rhapsody was one strategy, and developers said it was not good enough because it didn't provide a clear enough on-ramp for old Macintosh apps to be able to make it into the Mac OS X world. And so instead, or as a refinement of that strategy, they developed, well, they called it Mac OS X to give it a new name. And it was a strategy where Mac OS 9 applications could use APIs called Carbon, so that this, with minimal changes to your old Mac OS code, it could get many of the benefits of Mac OS X. That's pretty remarkable, actually, that they were able to pull that off. And that just changed the cost-benefit curve to bring many of the classic Mac OS developers with them to get developer support, to get user support for Mac OS X. And that's what ultimately caused Mac OS X to succeed where these other operating systems had failed. Other factors involved as well. All right, let's just look at the menus this time to see who's involved. I think I can pull down the menus, and that's safe. Under the View menu, we can view the different sizes. I'm not going to risk clicking them. Maybe I'll do that in some edited video I do later. So what about SPAS? Why does it say SPAS? In Mac OS 8 and beyond, I think, well, even older Mac OS, I think Special is the name of the menu here. Apparently, if you look in the different releases of Copeland, there are... Oh, hey, where'd my video go? There we go. Sorry for that flash. If you look at different releases of Copeland, there's different names for this menu, which I think is code names for the release. So SPAS is one. Here's where we have our restart and our shutdown. So yes, that's what SPAS is. Let's see if we can click on these icons. All right, keyboard, help, no help available, and application switcher, including system process and finder. All right, so let's see what we can do. Marathon Infinity is absolutely not going to run. Let's take a look at Mac OS 8 applications. So there's just a few applications here, and it's really just GX Slide Master that has something interesting. We'll look at the control panel. I think we can look at the control panel. AppleTalk setup. Now, I don't think we can actually connect to the network. I'm certainly not going to attempt it. But let's see if it even opens, or if I regret it. I don't know if you can hear the spinning hard disk on the microphone there, but it clunks along, but it always does in these old machines anyways. Looks like it's starting. AppleTalk setup. Connect via printer port. And that's our option. That's right, and networking before Ethernet was done over the printer port, which is interesting. Interesting white space here. I think the layout was not fully done here. Excuse me. Let's quit. Open a water here. Carbonated water. Let's take a look at GX Slide Master. So this is sort of a demo application, effectively, that's showing some of the things that Copeland can do. I think some of them were impressive. I think it's QuickDraw GX is maybe the name of the technology. But they're showing kind of visual drawing stuff they could do that was probably an advancement beyond what was available in System 7. Let's see if it successfully starts. Let's see how it goes. Graphics, it says. And yet, there are no graphics. It'll be there eventually. So design goals, presumably of Copeland, or maybe of QuickDraw GX. So that's kind of neat animations, like that was not there in System 7 type applications. Superior functionality, okay. First class performance, well, this is not exactly 60 frames per second. easy to use, seamless integration. Well, Copeland did not end up integrating with anything, but they were not done. Supports all Macintoshes. That's pretty cool if they were going for that. So shapes. So this stuff is going to get drawn out very quickly. Just kind of showing. I don't know why it keeps bouncing back to shapes. Maybe it's automatically going down to these child pages, but it's showing the drawing technologies of what it was pulling off. Kind of looks like a processor test, actually. You might run in Mac Bench. Yeah. Character forms. I wonder if that's different languages. Let's take a look through this for a second and see. I can't speak to this with any kind of informed opinion. Yeah, I think that was another character set. That would be interesting, as I feel like there is limited support in classic Mac OS for different character sets. Transforms. Yeah, these kind of transformations. Of course, we take 3D effects for granted today. I mean, that's key for the things we do. But classic System 7 programming was at a fairly low level. John Siracusa had a helpful blog post early in the Rhapsody Mac OS X era where he talked about different levels of programming and of graphics programming, and I forget the details of it. But the lowest level was drawing pixels and well, actually I don't remember if this is the lowest or the second level, but classic Mac OS operated, as I recall from just doing a tutorial just now, that's the other tutorial I bought, Programming Starter Kit for Macintosh. So I had this book back in the day. I remember it exactly. I remember the tutorial in it, and so I bought it again. It's all available online on the archives as well. But I bought that to try it again, and using that programming, like, you're drawing characters directly on the screen. I'm sure buttons are provided for you automatically, but yeah, you're kind of doing direct drawing operations most of the time in classic Mac OS. And so newer operating systems had higher level abstractions to do things like kind of acting more like a drawing program where you can select items and move them around in the same way you kind of assemble a screen from different objects. I mean, object-oriented programming. Colors, very interesting. So this is impressive to see it running. This could be a good thing to run to see if you can eventually get the operating system to crash. But yeah. All right, let's see if we can get out of here before it totally burns through my hard drive. Let me see if I can even click on the menus. Yeah, I'm just hearing hard drive clunking right now. Oh, we may have lost it. Looks like we did. So that's a quick tour of Copeland. If anybody joined in the stream, I hope you enjoyed it. Check out this recording. I mean, if you're watching this later, you're checking out the recording, so thanks for doing so. I'll post the link to Paul's more thorough, more researched tour of multiple versions of Copeland. And I'd encourage you to try it out if you like, if this is interesting. Not a whole lot you can do with it that's useful, but on the supported machines, I did not have too much trouble getting it working. My machine did come, when I got it, with a nice processor upgrade card, but Copeland would not have had, I did not even attempt to try. And so I got an original PowerMac 7500 100 601 processor, and once I put that in, and went through these other steps like downgrading the RAM, Copeland was good to go. And so it still works on the old machines if they still work. And so yeah, if you're interested in these things, give one of these old operating systems a try, whether Copeland, BOS, Rhapsody. Pick up a used machine to try it out. There's a lot of great YouTubers with a lot more information and knowledge than I have about maintaining and restoring these old machines and getting them working. Yeah, I hope to be doing more streaming soon to share more of these old machines with you and on some of the ones that have more than this to do in them. But this was Copeland, the introduction of the Platinum look and feel, which is probably its most enduring legacy, as the released macOS 8 looks very similar to that, and Platinum continued on through into Rhapsody and macOS 10 Server 1.0 until the Aqua OS came out. So this bridged the gap for a number of years, 96, 97 maybe, when macOS 8 came out, until 2000, when the new generation of Macintosh came around that was ready for us at that time. So. All right, thanks for watching, and we will catch you next time.